panel session. I should say I'm delighted that we have a very strong panelist team here, which is going to tackle a debate, I think, which is very important. Sport and the good news story tells half the story. The title tells half the story, I think. So I would like to introduce Rachel Church to you first of all. Rachel is the Director, Editorial and Comms for the World Academy of Sport. Rachel is going to moderate this session and indeed guide you through the rest of the course of the afternoon. Come on up, Rachel. And following close behind, Jens Andersen, International Director and founder of Play the Game and Local Boy. Oleg Matytsin, who is the President of FISU. Mark Parkman, Director of the Olympic Channel. Mark, good to see you. And Jackie Brock-Doyle, who is the Communications Director of the IAAF. Sorry, I will step out of the way and leave you in Rachel's hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. I doff my cap as ever to your hosting skills and look forward to continuing the rest of the afternoon. And thank you for introducing the panel as well, which has saved us valuable seconds, which counts when we have limited time as we do. So we've heard that the session is entitled Sport and the Good News Story. And before we dive into the discussion, it's worth sort of drawing on some of the recent industry trends that Dave has just mentioned, how they've influenced the media relationship between them and the IFs. But it was interesting that IOC President Bach last night said people just don't trust sport. So it might be quite interesting to explore whether that's because of the media and what they report, or whether it's because things have happened that way, or whether they haven't and they've been reported in a negative way. Or has sport actually lost its way so much that really there aren't any good stories left? Who knows? Can sport ever really counter the reality that bad news sells newspapers? My granny lived to 94 and said, "Rachel, the secret to a long life is never reading those newspapers, because they're so full of terrible news, and a gin and tonic every day for the rest of you." So, you know, we've just heard from David, there've never been so many ways to reach fans, you know, fragmented audiences, different ways of communicating with them, you know. And against that, journalists are complaining. I used to be one, I know. I was always whining about, oh, I've got too much to do, there's too much competition, they got that story before me, etc. So, you know, they're under pressure to find a story that makes them stand out from the crowds. They often feel excluded. Meanwhile, sport, or not all sport, of course, but some federations think that they should be suspicious of the media and maybe keep them at arm's length. So ultimately, our aim on this panel is to explore what can be done to build these bridges between sport and the media. You've just heard who our wonderful panelists are, so I thank you all for joining us today. And I'd like to kick off, if I may, with Jackie, as you're sitting furthest away from us. Let's address the elephant in the room, as it were, in terms of athletics. I guess, yes, has had a few bad stories recently from the press, and it'd be interesting to hear what the IAAF is doing to kind of repair that image, and perhaps drawing on some of the stuff that Sebco announced earlier in regards to your new way of addressing all that.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to blame the press for bad stories, but actually, in the main, the press report what they are seeing or what they're hearing and what they're being told. So I do tend to think, like everybody, there are journalists who will get things wrong, but in the main they are reporting a situation. And I think there's no difference with the way we're dealing with the press as we deal with everybody, which is we have to rebuild trust. And that is as important with the day-to-day journalists that cover our sport, the more political journalists, the more sports journalists that cover it, as it is with our fans and our partners and all of our other stakeholders. So I don't think it's any different, and I think building and rebuilding trust is about being open. It's about telling people where you want to be and where you want to go. It's having a vision. It's having a pathway that they can understand. They've got to be part of the journey of what you've got to do. So you have to be open, and you have to tell them what you're planning to do, why you're doing it, why you exist, how you're doing it. And you have to share that with them. And when they believe and understand, then I think you get a fair hearing. And I think that is probably what most of us would like. I think there's also a... they will always try and find the stories that they think will make federations and other sports really stand to account. And that's great. But they also are a massively important part of the inspirational storytelling, and they are critical in being able to do that. And the best that we should and could hope for is that we kind of meet in the middle. We're never going to be total partners in this, but we should never be fighting each other either. We need to be able to understand that we will have a role to play. But I do think a lot of the issues around trust lies with communication. If people know what you're trying to do, if they believe in what you're doing, and they believe you're trying well enough and hard enough to do it, then they will give you the benefit of the doubt.
And how much of a role do you have managing your national federations so that they foster similar relationships with the media?
I think a lot, and I think everybody, certainly within our sport, wants to get to the same place. I mean, the reforms that were introduced last year and the integrity unit that we launched today is actually the whole sport. This is 214 member federations who have got behind and who believe that this change needs to happen. And it's a journey. This is not going to change overnight, but we're prepared to go on that journey. We're prepared to take everybody with us, and I think that's important.
Jens, if I may move to you. Now, in terms of what you do in Play the Game, you might want to just quickly explain that to the audience, but also, do you feel you have the right, or journalists should have the right to influence the likes of the International Athletics Federation to actually dictate what their governance should be?
I am not aware of any journalists or any Play the Game activists that are dictating anything in sport.
Well, I know, for example, a few years ago, you reported that some newspapers came together to try and crack down on corruption in cycling and form a collective to
well, indeed, if I first may say that Play the Game, over the past 20 years, we have told some of the inconvenient stories through our international conferences, through our research projects, through our news communication, on a very journalistic basis, combined with an academic basis most often. We have been first movers in uncovering major issues like the threats of match fixing, earlier than that, the use of EPO in cycling, FIFA corruption since the year 2000, and this has not earned us much love in international sport. I'm very pleased to hear the balanced view of the role of the media that Jackie expresses, because I would say the general attitude in sport has been denial, rejection. Every time our journalists have exposed these kinds of issues, illegal doping trade, if I may, corruption also in other organizations than FIFA, corruption and mismanagement in volleyball, handball, weightlifting, what have we. Every time the answer is, you are very negative people, you are destroying our sport, you are extremists, and most of all, very serious for a journalist, you are exaggerating. Now, every time the police stepped in these cases, it became apparent that if the journalists in our network did anything wrong, it was underestimating the size of crime, the size of threats to social order and stability that was embedded in sports organization. And here's a serious problem, that journalists cannot move sports governance. Journalists can only feed the information that can give us an understanding about how international organizations in sport work, and then hopefully inspire sports leaders in the first place, but I'm afraid very often it's also necessary to inspire legal authorities or politicians to create better conditions in governance.
Oleg, moving along to you, what's the relationship like between FISU and the media?
Thank you so much. First, let me thank having me here among such distinguished leaders. I believe everyone sitting in this room understands today media are getting more and more power. It's a great power, but as any power, it could be constructive or can destroy the world. And the same, we have sport as a great power today, because sport can be the model of the life. Sport can educate people, can unite people, can provide people how to play according to the rule, how to play fair, how to respect the opponent. So it is the basic rules in the life. And if the people really go through the sport with such a good experience in sport, it's a very good platform for the future to be really to play a fair game during the future life. In FISU, I think we are managing business among 170 federations and more than 25,000 universities, organizing every 2 years Universiade, where people from around the world coming and having a great festival, not just sport, but really fantastic opportunity to communicate to each other, to sharing educational experience, life experience, and afterward, they coming back to the countries as an ambassador of the peace and unity. And I just want to give you example Kazan University had. More than 50,000 young people went through the experience to be a part of the great team, which today they are very proud to be part of the society, proud that really took the fantastic life experience. And now most of them, they are leaders. So we create the platform to be leader. And from our side, from the side of sport organization, I would recommend, first, of course, to be proactive with media, because we should create the content of our activity and our events. And content of the events, I think, should be the focus on the athletes, because athletes are the heart of the events, and they should play the key role in the presentation and the media coverage. And also, event itself, it's not just a result. It should be the platform for the future. So we think and we speak about the social legacy, not just economical impact, but the social legacy, human legacy, how people after event, they're coming be more active and they represent the countries, universities, sport itself. So I believe we in FISU as a sport university organization, first we focus on the athletes, how to educate people through the sport, as Pierre de Coubertin mentioned more than 100 years ago. So the main principle, how to provide the best conditions for the young generation, feel as proud of the countries, universities, and be active as a member of society.
In terms of the young people you're engaging with as well, it perfectly fits the millennials we've been hearing about and being able to address those through the channels they also use, as well as being competitors. You have a similar demographic, don't you, Mark, at the Olympic channel? Hope you like that segue there, everyone. Perhaps you can talk about how the Olympic channel is doing at the moment, but also whether that's part of the IOC's overall comms strategy, or whether you see yourselves very much neutral in your own media channel.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Well, we're only 8 months old, so we're a bit younger than our demographic that we're trying to attract. But yeah, we launched at the closing ceremonies of the Rio Games, and in 8 short months, we've had an incredible success on social media. We've increased the overall social following of the IOC platforms by about 6 million followers. We've had more than 500 million video views and 2.6 billion impressions across all of our platforms. And the good news in that is that 94% of those social followers on Facebook are under 34, 52% across our owned and operated platforms are under 34. So what we've been able to achieve is to hit that target demographic that we're wanting to inspire them to become more participatory in sport, to get them more involved, to get them more engaged. So that's in that regard, we've been successful. And what we're trying to do with the channel, we have a news division, which we are addressing some of the stories that are making more of the headlines, but our primary source of programming is to tell stories about the athletes, because there are phenomenally good stories about what athletes around the world are doing, how they're getting there, and we're trying to tell them in a more expansive way so that people become more familiar what good sport can do, and make it so that more people are participating. We're raising the value of all of our partners, be it IFs, NOCs, rights holders, sponsors, the athletes themselves, to make it so that they understand that this is an incredible value proposition for the entire Olympic movement.
And so you do see yourself as sort of being part of the method of the IOC to give a good story to the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have games every 2 years for 17 days. We're trying to keep that flame alive between the time of the games, doing it so that when the games do come around, as Greg from CBC said in a panel or two ago, we want people to know about these athletes and know what they've done, as opposed to having them being introduced when they're on a podium. Stealing his quote, but that's what he said they're trying to accomplish in Canada. We're under the same philosophy. We want people to know for 2 years, 4 years in between the games, to know these athletes, so when they are on stage during the 17 days, that people can watch the final episode of their journey.
Okay. Jackie, I know Lord K was also very bullish about having athletes at the part of your international federation story and your sports story. How does that actually work? Because I'm quite interested in how much control do athletes have over what comes out of their own mouths and how much is sort of managed by you guys to create those good stories?
Well, it's the holy grail, really, isn't it? Whether you are a journalist or a fan or a sports federation, it's the athlete that everybody wants to project. They are the inspirational story, and actually nobody really owns them anymore. Maybe occasionally a sponsor might, certainly the manager and agent, but certainly not the federation. So I think part of it is, from where we sit, our belief is if you put the athlete really at the very heart and centre of the federation, you will get so much right. So the integrity unit that we launched today is really around a holistic look at integrity, not just anti-doping or transfer of allegiance. It's really looking at the ecosystem that an athlete starts in and finds itself in, because it's rarely one small thing that gets broken. It's a number of little things that break down in that ecosystem that surrounds them that creates the news story that will affect the rest of their lives and the decisions they make. So for us, it's making sure they feel they have a voice. So, you know, we've increased athletes on the council, so they're there. We've got a very active athletes commission, and we give them and empower them to come and talk to us about every decision we make. They were really central to the reforms that that we've done. And then the integrity unit is all about them. The website that we've launched today isn't sort of aimed at the media or the public. It's aimed at them. You know, this is where you will find the rules. You'll know the rules, get knowledge, a centre of kind of knowledge, learn, share. You know, even the video content is not about the unit, it's about them, and it's about the decisions that they need to make. And we feel that our job as a federation, in addition to obviously hosting and organising great sports for them and great events, is really to make sure they have a supportive framework so they can make the right decisions every single time they need to make a decision, from the beginning of their careers right through to the end.
And you've got, obviously, access to all that rich content you mentioned in the form of athletes, or the assets, as I heard them refer to, which sounds like FBI targets, so we won't use that. But in terms of how much you choose to keep, or your national federations choose to keep for themselves for your own media channels, how much you choose to share with the general media, you know, is there a kind of a conflict in terms that you want to share save the best stories for your own channels and your own audiences?
No, look, there's a commercialization that is intrinsic in everything we do, whether it's rights holders who, you know, get the exclusive right to show the event because they put the money in to, you know, for the equipment. But it's got to be in everyone's interests, everyone's, to share the stories. And what we should spend more of our time doing, I think, as a federation and as news organizations, is how can we work together to share some brilliant and amazing and inspirational stories. Because whether you're a sports journalist or a news journalist or you're in sport, actually we're in it because we love sport and we believe in sport and we believe it can inspire and change lives. So the best thing we can all do is work together, not try and steal each other's stories and work out who gets a bit of this and who gets a bit of that. If there's a great story to tell, and we can see it in the news and we see it in sport every day, if there's a great story, everyone will tell it. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to find those great stories, use the athletes who are amazing human beings and help them to, you know, shape and fashion the lives of the next generation.
Jens, you look like you had a comment to make on it.
Well, it's because I am really fascinated by the fact that you have all mentioned now that we have to look behind the podium and look not only to the medal winners and the moment of triumph, and so I think that's absolutely right. And I would say you even have to, in order to tell the good story, the right story, and the wider sport engagement story, not just about taking corrupt leaders down, you also have to go much wider in your focus than just the elite athletes. You would have to have help journalists understand what is happening at grassroots level. How is the sports politics of your country built? Who are the one who allocates the sports facilities? Who decides about grants for constructing an ice skating hall or parkour venue or whatever? And there, I think we can all agree, the media is almost completely absent. I mean, we have worked for 20 years, not only in corruption and so on, but really 50% of our energy has gone into saying there is a sports culture there. And it needs not complacent journalists who would just go with whatever positive story. It also needs journalistic, academic, and political analysis. Because what's happening right now is that the federations represented here are losing ground. And nobody describes that situation. Perhaps many sports leaders are happy that this situation is not described. It would be then revealed that some of their rhetoric is a bit hollow. But on the other hand, if nobody describes that situation, it will be like a situation with the nobility in the 18th century, who had no contact outside their luxury bubble. And one day, suddenly, the fundament where they thought that it would be dancing minuet had been eroded. And this is why I would say sports organization should roll out the red carpet and be proactive, as you say, with a wide range of journalistic endeavors.
You talked about the lack of coverage of sort of grassroots sports. And Mark, I'm wondering if that's something that the Olympic Channel covers. I know there are lots of great stories that came out of Rio, particularly from the new sports joining the programme, golf, rugby in particular. Right. And if Dominic had been able to join us today from World Rugby, as he was originally going to, I'm sure he would have talked about how they work very closely with local media in Brazil to share those stories. So do you believe there's a good balance of grassroots versus mainstream?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the Olympic Channel. We have more than 50 agreements with international federations, and if you know the Olympic movement, they're 35 plus the new 5. So there are 10 organizations that aren't in the Olympic program that we are actively showing their content and introducing their sports and showing it at a grassroots level to give them that exposure. Furthermore, in all of our content that we're creating, we're not necessarily focusing on the Usain Bolts and Michaela Schifrins and Costa. We are really focusing on the athletes that have just as an uphill struggle to get where they are, and introduce to the public what their accomplishments have been, and that's where it's really at the grassroots. I mean, a perfect example of grassroots sport is we developed a series called Camps to Champs, where we took some Olympians into refugee camps. And some of those refugees are, their inspiration and their motivation is because they're playing sport in those camps. They're creating weightlifting equipment out of cinder blocks. They're playing table tennis on not a regulation table. That's the true power of grassroots sport, to see how it can inspire people who have been displaced, see people who are young and how they have goals and ambitions. And that's one of the things that I think, if I may say so myself, I think we've done a very good job of doing.
Well, certainly I think my granny would have watched more news if she was watching stories such as those, rather than some of the ones we've been more familiar with in recent years. Oleg, obviously grassroots is at the core. You know, you're reaching young people as part of your sport. So do you agree with what the consensus is on this panel, that young people are the way forward for engagement with media?
Yeah, sure. And in our organization, International University Sport Federation, we're also thinking not about the event itself, but what gone before the event and after. And we consider sport as should be part of educational system. That's why we are trying to be more in close contact with universities and explain to the leaders and the local national authorities why sport should play a very important role in educate people. And today I see the problem of communication for the young people, because most of them using the social network, and finally when they come to the same place and have the opportunity to live more than 10 days together in athletes village, so they understand the world, the same time the small and the really big one. The big difference but at the same time, we are all together more or less the same. We have the same values, we have the same aim for stability in our society, for development. And we in FISU planning many events around, I can say, around the games, because we not just organize the games itself. Now we have very good project like a volunteers camp. So the leaders from volunteers movement from 170 countries coming for 1 week and sharing experience, and then again coming back and giving their experience, life experience and educational experience from around the world. Also, we organize under the umbrella of UNESCO International Day of University Sport. I mean the festival activity, not just sport activity. And that's create the stories, because the young people needs to be visible, to have the, again, platform to realize themselves. And in this case, I think the media, Olympic Channel, all media really have the great power and should give the great support for young people, how to be visible, how to realize themselves, and how to be successful. Because everyone would like to be successful. And sport is a really fantastic tool, how to find you and how to demonstrate your potential. And then, when we see the young people on the podium with the national flag, national anthem, they are really proud. And this really they keep for all their life. So this is should be a great story, how to educate young people through the sport and how give them the real support for their life today and how to teach them to communicate and play according to the rules. So maybe I will use funny word, but I think the view for media should be not outside the games, should be inside the games. So the media should be included as the partner one team. Because we have, as I understand, we have the same mission, how to provide the good future and stability, sustainable development for the future in all countries.
When you mention the games, I should point out that other major sporting events are available. So, but when you talk about young people as well, often they're the new media in a way. It's the user-generated content we used to always talk about. I don't know if we use that term anymore. But certainly, how does that sort of muddy the waters when you're trying to sort of put forward different messages? Because they'll probably be the first to put something up on YouTube that's not very flattering, potentially. So, Jens, what's your take on that?
I'm not particularly focusing on young people. And when I hear that sport can educate people and sport can inspire people, I would say yes, but also the other way around. People can educate sport. People can inspire sport. Because partly we have a demographic issue of at least part of the world is getting, in the western part, the rich part of the world, is getting older and older. And still, I think worldwide, with the growing appetite for Western lifestyle, for material consumption, for screens of all kinds, we are all engaged in the, I don't know if you know, but we are all at risk now, because we are actually practicing right now the most life-threatening activity that exists.
Well, big on this panel.
Here in this room, sitting still. And if we want, this is medically, there's really solid evidence that this is really, really a threat to our lives, but please stay. And
we're getting up in a minute, everyone.
Yeah, but I mean, in that perspective, you may be right that we have some of the same goals, but I would say, no, we also have different goals. First of all, the media should play their role in democracies, inform citizens about what is going on, including the negative things. But I agree to the notion that the media is neglecting a bit their role on everyday life, on not only in sport, but also outside sport. Of course, there is also a business model in the media that's telling the critical story in the negative sense. Sometimes there is an illusion that this will increase the media's credibility. But I don't think this is a situation very much when we are talking on the high sports political level. But nevertheless, with regard to the grassroots sport, the engagement of people in sport, it would be very good if there was a bigger journalistic commitment, editorial commitment, to analyze and tell those stories about who is actually driving the change right now. As far as I know, it is not the people at this conference who are driving the fitness industry, which has been the most successful movement industry. It is not the people in this room who invented running in nature. This also is another trend. We have also within the football industry, in countries where they neglect, where they just talk about the top teams and neglect the grassroots, then you have the private sector offering football tournaments, street football, street basket, and what have we. And it is the role of the media to embrace that development so that everybody also in this conference can learn.
Absolutely. I'm mindful that we are running out of time and would love to open the floor to questions from the audience. If anyone has something to say, we have a question at the back. You can say who you are and where you're from. That would be fantastic.
Hello there. Hello. Hi, my name is Mark Cooper. I work with an agency called JTA and have a particular interest in the communication cycle around major sports events. We seem to be stuck a little bit in a cycle whereby we have years of questions and often criticism of preparations, a really exciting reporting about 2 weeks of wonderful sport, and then starting from the day after there are questions about legacy and about cost. How can we move on from that?
Who would like to take that, Jens? Yeah.
It's a question we have dealt with for more than 10 years now, and I would say, first of all, and this could very much address some of the groups in this at this conference, stop telling lies. Stop creating illusions about how wonderful the world will change if this event goes to this town. Events have a cost. Events are not made, in my view, to promote tourism, to increase employment, to rescue a country's finances. Events are cultural manifestations. We do appreciate arts and invest in art because we appreciate art. We do invest in elite sports competition because they fascinate us and thrill us. Now, this should be the backbone of explaining why it costs money, and then don't underestimate the cost, because this is one of the problems. If you have said that an event will cost $100 million, and you see over and over again that the price tag, and now I mentioned from a scientific report, I think it's a little underestimated, but the price tag is always 2.5 times higher, and we are talking often about very big public money, then of course sports organization and the event boosting industry owes the public who pays the show an explanation. And hence, there is a negative impact. But I think we should really cherish fantastic events for the thrill, and not try to explain them with all kind of fantasy legacy activities. Of course, we should work on the legacy. And there are good examples of organizations really ensuring that the athletes' villages, that the training grounds and so on, the performance grounds, are used afterwards. For instance, Medellin, 2010, host of the South American Games, I think they'd had an excellent, successful legacy project, and they did not promise more what they could keep.
Jackie?
So, no, I agree. I think there's a lot that we need to understand around being authentic. I mean, when you go through a bidding process, you make promises sometimes that actually aren't yours to keep, and we've seen that in many organisations. I worked on the London 2012, and I think we kept a fairly reasonable balance with what we said we would deliver and what we did. But unlike a lot of organising committees, actually most of the people that were part of the bid, and I saw Debbie Jevons Sport here earlier, actually stayed through to the games. And I think that actually is quite telling, because if you've made a promise in the bid and you're there to deliver it, you really do. If it's a different changeover, it's quite difficult. But I agree. I think there are some promises that are made. I think that often in sport, and going to Mark's question, I think that we lack leadership, actually. And I think Rio is a really good example of this. If you look at the lead up into Rio, there was a country whose leadership was really put to the test and was questioned. I think there was real dispute around leadership on anti-doping in the world of sport, you know, and I'm not, IAAF took one stance, others took different stances. But what happens if you have no leadership, and it's not, and actually no leadership is worse than poor leadership is that you then allow people to create a situation. So we ended up in Rio with athletes on podiums accusing their fellow athletes of cheating or being on drugs. That's just not can't be tolerated. Through a creation, and this was the media in its broadest sense, about how unsafe Rio was and how everyone would get mugged on the streets, we created an American story where an athlete lied because he felt he could get away with it because of the situation that had been created. You know, nobody died of Zika, nobody actually got mugged, and you know, none of these stories really happened. So I think when there is no leadership, what happens is it doesn't affect performances. Rio had some of the best performances of any Olympic Games, but it affects behaviour. And I think that is where we need in sport to be a little bit better. I think we need to take leadership, be leaders, and help people understand that there is a way. And even if some of the decisions are wrong, actually there is a leadership there, and you're not allowing a kind of free-for-all to happen. And in Rio, that's what we saw. Performances, brilliant. Behaviour, pretty appalling, really.
And I bet you would have managed that green pool situation a bit in a different way, definitely.
Green pool's a green pool. You know what? Shit happens, and you just had to deal with it. That's kind of it happens. But I still you look back at Rio and you just think, how can you? And it happens in business. You know, you can see this in businesses where you have leaders who may be delivering fantastic shareholder results, but actually the behaviour and the culture within their organisation is wrong because there is, you know, the leadership is poor. And I think that's what we saw with Rio.
Jens, you had a comment you wanted.
Yeah, just briefly, I think Rio is exemplary, both the World Cup and the Olympics, of sports organizations not having done their due diligence. I mean, sports organizations at the very top level are very, very spoiled kids. They are running around with the big shots of multinational companies. They are living in a luxury environment almost all the time. And had FIFA done more than just window dressing with regard to engaging with NGOs, instead of just mostly siding with the big entrepreneurial enterprises, had the IOC done the same also, shown that they were actually with the Brazilians and not just clinging on to some pretty blurry stuff about how everything has improved in Rio after the Olympics and how it would improve. If this has been done, a true social dialogue and a true commitment to ensuring that the benefits was not just private benefits to be harvested by pretty corrupt classes in Brazil, I think much would look different. People would actually perhaps side with the Olympics much more than they have done. I'm aware that Brazil has other problems than big sports organizations coming into the country, and this has very much played into the lack of confidence in the big events. But again, perhaps the international sports community should seek broader alliances.
Mm-hmm. Jens, you need to work on saying it really how it is. You have a comment?
Yeah. I believe behind all big events should be the project, and this project should be supported by the majority of the citizens who live in this country, in the city. Because sometimes we see that the project like some kind of ambitions of some political leaders or some, how to say, event very short effect. And in FISU, for example, we always, when we are looking for the future partners organizing Universiade, the key partners should be university community. And we are thinking, first of all, about the human legacy. So if we see then thousands and thousands of young people be part of the project for more than 5 years, and then they're educated, anyway, it would not destroy this community. The people stay in the same country, the same city. And we, of course, we are thinking about the transport infrastructure, venues, but mainly we focus on the people. And if people will support the project, and if it will not be the white elephant, so I think the leader of the country, leader of the city will be proud about the project, and of course they should be very open before they start the bid.
Mark, did you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, I think there is a shared responsibility for all cities in countries who host events, because, you know, I come from Atlanta, and the Atlanta games were very maligned by the media. But when you look at as Jackie referred to, what happened on the field of play during those 17 days was phenomenal. Almost every venue of every session was sold out. When you look at the legacy that the games had on Atlanta itself, the Centennial Olympic Park, which was built in probably the worst area of downtown Atlanta, and how that has single-handedly transformed that whole part of the city and become the #1 tourist attraction with 6 or 7 museums, aquariums, etc. And when you think about the venues that are still in use, some even the stadium, which is now in its 3rd iteration, it was the Atlanta Braves baseball field. Now it's going to be the Georgia State University athletic complex. But sometimes people don't want to tell those stories. They don't want to focus on the good. They want to talk about whether the buses ran on time. They want to talk about whether the IBM failed on the result system. There are a lot of good legacy stories that people need to take a closer look and make sure that those are being told. And I think that's one of the things that the cities themselves need to have a shared responsibility to make sure that once the circus leaves town, it's their turn to now make sure that they take the benefit of that incredible exposure, the incredible event, and make it real. And I'm proud to say that I think Atlanta is a shining light for having done so.
It's
but you
true.
need to.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to interrupt.
well, I was going to come to you next, Jackie, from a London perspective.
Because you need to be able to set your stall out at the beginning, and what a lot of games do, and I think London was different, and I'm not just saying that was part of it, but I think a lot of the benefits happen after. I mean, when I worked on the Sydney Games, we didn't spend a single minute of any day on the Sydney Games thinking about legacy. Didn't even occur to us. 50% of the organising committee's time in London was spent thinking about legacy, even though it wasn't our job to do it. So I think we were able to, from the very beginning, from the bid, is to say these are the promises we made. And most of them we kept. We didn't keep them all. Unfortunately, you can't keep all of them. But mostly, you have to have the right intention, which is make some promises and then keep them. And actually, that is a lot harder to do over 10 years than it sounds. And often you get to the end of a games and people go, well, this is what the legacy will be. And you're still going, well, actually, 7 years ago, you said it was going to be this. And it's about being honest. It's about saying, these are the promises we're going to make, and then we'll tell you how we're doing on them. Don't overpromise. And if you do make promises and you can't keep them, explain to people why you can't keep them. But then make sure the promises go back. And we did that in London. We said, this is what we're going to do. And we got to the very end and we said, this is what we've done. And we didn't make lots of promises. We made a few. And some we couldn't deliver. And we were quite honest about it. But it is remarkably hard, or it seems remarkably hard to do that.
Do you think that's how you managed to turn around some pretty strong negative opinion about the games in the beginning to quite positive stories by the end?
We didn't lie. Yeah. We told people what we wanted to do and we delivered it. And sometimes we just didn't deliver. And we kind of put our hands up and went, we can't deliver this, and this is why.
Yeah. Mark, that was an incredibly long answer to your question, but thank you for it. You have another hand up at the end. You've probably got a chance for two more questions. Do you have another question? No? No, I saw some hand movement. With my eyesight, it's never that good to spot. I'd like to then invite each of the panelists to sum up, if they may, perhaps just sort of coming back to the theme of this. And I'll start with you, Jens. What would your advice be to international federations for improving relationships with the media? What would you tell them to do?
Just a short note about legacy. Make strategies and spend time. I think that's what you say there, that's crucial. I think London, from the outside, I don't know the details, appears very successful in one of the big promises that you made. That was the development of Eastern London. The second development to increase by pretty big figures sports participation, less successful, because that's another fantasy is that an event will inspire people to do a lot of exercise, which is so rare, if it has ever happened, that I would not even mention it here. You have to have strategies then to how you can use that event to invest in grassroots sport. But investment in grassroots sport participation, physical activity, requires direct investment, like almost anything else. And other than that, I would just invite sports organizations to roll out the red carpet for public debate, for broad social engagement, and be ready to take some slapping and discussion and infight on the road. I think it will pay off instead of isolating yourself in very prestigious environments.
Jackie, what about from the other viewpoint? How would you improve relationships with media? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share with you the participation figures for London, because even at sort of 7% increase in participation, that in a population of 64 million is still quite a lot. But the point is the right one. You have to keep investing. You cannot expect if you build it, they will come anymore. You have to keep continuing to invest. I think for me, with the media, it is. It's about trying to find the things that you have in common, not just the things that separate you. And we do have different roles and different responsibilities. And you can sit there and get, really pissed off with the press and something they've written or a headline or whatever. But at the end of the day, they do have an investigative role in what you do, and you have a storytelling role and a promotional role, or we do in what we do in the Federation. But there is common ground, and I think the big opportunity is, as Jan said, you have to go toe-to-toe with the media. You have to be open. You have to expect some criticism. But at the same time, I think we have a right also, and we get quite a lot of exposure. The World Relays coming up in the Bahamas will be a great opportunity to tell some fantastic stories about relay running and leadership and teams that nobody has ever even thought you could get out of our sport. So there's some great stories, and you have to create the partnerships where they exist, but suck it up sometimes when you actually do things wrong, and sometimes it gets reported. Hey, that's just the world we live in.
Oleg, do you have some final advice for the media?
Okay, I'd just like to support my colleagues. It's a really great opportunity. Today we are discussing, and my vision for the future of our communication with media, we should be more open as we can, and to explain our action, our project, again, to be proactive and to be honest at the same time. So play the same, maybe I agree a little bit, we have maybe not the same mission, but we play on the same team. As a sport media team. So let's play in one team and be open and use any chance to communicate to each other.
Perfect. Mark, the final words of wisdom from yourself.
Well, I see this big time's up, so I agree with everyone. I think it's authenticity, it's openness, it's collaboration, it's making sure that you're transparent and you're dealing with them on a daily basis to make sure that you're getting your side and you're also responding to the things that you may not want to respond.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm so sorry we're out of time, but I'd like to get everyone to join me in thanking our wonderful panel for their time today.
Thank you.